Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, because we know people are joining from different parts of the world. My name is Pradeep Nayak, and I'm at the University of Waterloo, but I'm also representing here the V2B, the Vulnerability to Viability Global Partnership on Small-Scale Fisheries. I will be hosting this today on behalf of the V2B Global Partnership here. Um, Welcome, everyone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a few rounds of introductions before we start to listen to our esteemed guest today, who will speak about small-scale fisheries. So the Vulnerability to Viability, or V2B Global Partnership, is a transdisciplinary research, knowledge, and action network with over 100 members from Africa, Asia, Canada, and internationally. The goal of the global partnership is to support small-scale fisheries in their transition from vulnerability to viability. And the way we understand vulnerability and viability is not just in an economic sense, but also to include all aspects of humans and small-scale fishery societies that represents the political, the ecological, the cultural, and all related aspects. In doing so, what we focus is on four things. One is the co-production or creation of the knowledge that can facilitate the transition from vulnerability to viability. And with that knowledge, to create a database or repository in the form of an information system. And then the third one is to also work on developing the necessary transdisciplinary capacity that is effective in this transition from vulnerability to viability. And the fourth focus is on synthesizing and integrating the knowledge in ways that is relevant for policy, practice, and theory. The V2B Global Partnership aims to identify the diverse factors and conditions contributing to the vulnerability of small-scale fisheries and engage collaboratively with small-scale fisher communities and other key NGO, government, and university partners to enhance small-scale fisheries viability. We are conducting transdisciplinary community-engaged research in 6 countries in Asia. That includes Bangladesh, India, Indonesia, Japan, Malaysia, and Thailand, and 6 countries in Africa that includes Ghana, Malawi, Nigeria, Senegal, South Africa, and Tanzania. In doing so, the V2B Global Partnership brings people and organizations together across physical, cultural, and disciplinary boundaries through a shared interest in addressing global change impacts on small-scale fisheries. The V2B thematic webinar series, for which we have all gathered here today, is an initiative of the V2B Global Partnership to facilitate and generate high-level discussions on vulnerability and viability themes and topics within the context of small-scale fisheries. The goal is to feature academics, government representatives, policymakers, practitioners, and members of the civil society who have made significant contributions to the theoretical, practical, and policy aspects of small-scale fisheries, both locally and globally. The V2B thematic webinar series takes place on the last Friday of every month, and this month it is an exception because the last Friday would be a holiday, so we are doing it in the middle of the month, but it is usually on the last Friday of every month, and it will continue to be so in the future. A new series of the V2B Global V2B thematic webinar series in 2023 will be announced soon on this space. The series is available internationally through live streaming on YouTube. Details regarding the monthly webinars, including speakers, topics, and titles, and links to webinar platforms is available on our webpage, www.v2bglobalpartnership.org. Today's webinar is the 12th in the series, which is the last in 2022 of the V2B thematic webinars planned for the year 2022. And the 24th since January 2021 when we started. And it is my privilege to introduce Dr. Friday Najaya as our distinguished speaker today. Dr. Friday Najaya is the Director of Fisheries in Malawi. He has a vast experience in fisheries management, governance of fisheries, project coordination, policy analysis, and scholarly work. He cuts across all these theoretical, policy, and practice, boundaries really nicely because of his work, with the community, with the policy, and also because of his scholarly writings in the field of small-scale fisheries. He holds a PhD from the University of Western Cape in South Africa. He was a UNFTP fellow in 2002 and a member of the International Institute of Fisheries Economics and Trade, IIFET, and IASC since 1998. Dr. Najaya has been a research partner of various research projects involving organizations like FAO, WorldFish, CMI, North Sea Center, NEPAD, MSU, and UWC. And I am also proud to announce, that Dr. Najaya is a co-investigator and a country coordinator of Malawi within the B2B Global Partnership and the network itself. He has made numerous contributions to the viability of small-scale fisheries in Malawi, Africa, and globally. Apart from his policy-focused work as part of his job, one thread of his contribution links with his excellent scholarly work, and you could find it online, the work that he has done on fisheries governance, management, and all other aspects of small-scale fisheries. So it is my honor to invite Dr. Friday Najaya to deliver today's talk for the B2B thematic webinar series 2022. And his talk is titled as Towards a Viable Transboundary Small-Scale Fishery, Lessons from Lake Chiuta in Malawi. Welcome once again, Dr. Najaya, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Pratip, and welcome everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on wherever you are. I'll be sharing my screen and so that we see the presentation. Is it okay, Pratip?
It looks fine, and you also, your voice is good, so you can stay on camera, as well.
Right, you can see now the title, Towards a Viable Transboundary Fishery, small-scale fishery.
Yes,
I see that one. All right, so can I maybe switch off my video so that I'm audible enough? Oh.
Yeah, you can keep the video.
I can keep the video. You can hear.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, yeah.
All right, then I can continue. So my talk today is on Towards a Viable Transboundary Small-Scale Fishery, lessons from Lake Chiuta. This is shared between Malawi and Mozambique. As Pratip has mentioned, I'm co-coordinator of V2V project, and I'm director of fisheries here in Malawi. I'll take you through introduction. I'll look a bit of methodology, but also let's look at the roadmap for transboundary fisheries management for Lake Chiuta, and then have final thoughts. I'll start my talk with some quotes. I think I've got one quote here, which says, Lake Chiuta is one of the two remaining large Malawian lakes in reasonable health. Take note of health, that is from a fisheries perspective. The others, which means the other lakes, have been seriously degraded or fished out in a country which formerly depended very heavily on a significant process of fish protein in its children's diets as a key input for proper fiscal maturation. This one was cited by Thompson in 2006, but the one who wrote this one was in Coca. I'm quite sure maybe he's online. That was in 2003. He's a journalist on natural resources in Malawi. Another quote is from Lake Chiuta Fisheries Management Association Chair, is Mr. Matthias Manner. That was in 2013 on June 7th. He said, I am now a self-appointed fisheries extension officer for Lake Chiuta, as I plan and implement all fisheries activities, including extension and enforcement services. And he went on to say the government seems to have failed. What is the motivation of my talk? When you look at many ecosystems around the globe that are shared between or among countries, there's less attention that is given to very small ecosystems, very small lakes. We always tend to go for these large ecosystems. And this happened with what happened with the Lake Chiuta before 1995. It was not legally recognized. But yet, when you go there, there are so many issues, there are so many conflicts, whether you look at the biological or ecosystem health, whether you're looking at the society priorities or objectives in terms of wealth generation, food security, nutrition, and even policy and legislative frameworks. Or other issues also on governance, but also you are looking at the scale. Should we go for these large scale ecosystems, or we can even go for the smaller ones? Because these are what the local communities depend on. But the question is, how is a fishery valued at community level? In terms of methodology, this is basically a desk work, but of course I had also to ask my colleagues to bring in some data, which we will be going through. But we are looking at the ecosystem approach as a framework by IUCN, and mainly the framework is on the publication by Van der Linde, that was 2001, Beyond Boundaries, and it's the Transboundary Natural Resource Management in Sub-Saharan Africa. I think it's quite useful book, quite useful publication, which can guide us whenever we are looking at the transboundary natural resource management or transboundary fisheries initiatives. But also I've gone through workshop reports, but also field reports and some consultancy reports. Let us now look at the Chiuta itself. It's a small lake in the southern part of Malawi, about 2,200 square kilometers, of which 60% lies in Malawi and 40% in Mozambique. It's a bit shallow, maximum 5 meters deep, and it's predominantly artisanal. And in the 1970s, it was not recognized by government as such. It's very remote, but also it's small. And when you look at the fish production, it has been estimated at 1,500 tons per year. That's on the Malawian side. But if we now collaborate with our colleagues on the Mozambican side, I'm quite sure it can go to over 2,500 metric tons per year. The lake bottom is muddy with submerged vegetation. Open water is there, but also a bit of more of marshy areas. There are some influent rivers, but with one major outlet. The main species, dominantly, there are 4: Orychromys, the rendari is there. We have got the Grapinus, Clarius Grapinus, but also Barbus pardonosus. These are the dominant fish species. Of course, Grapinus rendari nowadays, people can talk about captive rendari as well. The craft is mainly dugout or plank canoes, mainly used for both subsistence as well as catch. Nowadays, mostly for catch. And for gears, we have gill nets, fish traps, and long lines. And of course, we have also got open water seines, which on the Malawian side are banned. We are banned since 1995, while on the Mozambican side, they are allowed. And this has been the source of conflicts. So the arrow there is showing this is one typical open water seine, what we call Nkacha. Now, let's look at the concept of transboundary natural resource management before we move on to transboundary fisheries management, because they are more or less the same. TNRM is a process of collaboration across boundaries to increase the effectiveness of attaining goals of natural resource management or biodiversity conservation. And as I mentioned, this is from Van der Linde in 2001. However, Griffin and his colleagues in 1999 came up with a similar definition, but added that the TNRM is for the benefit of the parties concerned in the initiative. So when you look at the TNRM, it's not only for either governments, but even all the stakeholders that are taking part in the initiative. They have to have at least the benefits. And we can go further to say a central premise of ecosystem management is that the structure and functional integrity of the system should be maintained, while at the same time allowing for the use of the goods and services provided by the ecosystem. If we go in further, what is the process like? If we are trying to establish a transboundary fisheries management initiative. Looking at what Van Dan Linde is guiding us to say we should start with scoping, the initial scoping. And when you look at what is the process like, you have a team going out to the field. So we do initial scoping, and whenever you assess, it's either you can proceed with transboundary or no transboundary, looking at the consultations and even the feedback. But we have also to go to the field to look at the stakeholder, who are the key stakeholders in the initiative, and continue until we do a bit of further scoping and further analysis done. And if we agree, yes, we can go for transboundary fisheries management or transboundary natural resource management, then we should come up with the goal, the purpose, the vision, and the mandate as agreed by the parties. So there are 3 phases that they came up with. As I indicated, this is a very important publication. Maybe we don't use it, but it's quite useful. In phase 1 is this looking at field-based coordination and collaboration, whereby we are saying we have to respond to the objectives of transborder cooperation between 2 either countries or nations. And there should be regular communication between field staff and even the communities. But also there's need to share information on resource monitoring and have joint planning and the implementation of the activities. In the phase 2, there's now the issue about formalization of the transborder collaboration and harmonization of policies. So we have to look at what is existing and what is being used when you look at the harmonized approaches in the respective countries. There should be a minimal level of political support among the respective official governments, but also we need to continue with collaborating at field level. Phase 3, which there is indicated, is the signing, the official signing, the formal signing of the DFM. In this case, we're talking about Transboundary Fisheries Management Agreement between or among respective governments. So the agreement has to outline in its preamble the legislative background of the DFM. We have to look at also define the purpose, but also we have to define the ecosystem area and its structures. If possible, let's have a commission or any other mechanisms. And also modus operandi, modes of operation have to be highlighted. This is more or less in some cases I've tried to modify just to suit the Lake Chiuta scenario. So what has been the roadmap? When you look at the transboundary fisheries management for Lake Chiuta, that's between Malawi and Mozambique. Before mid-1970s, as a historical background, there was a traditional fisheries management system in most of these water borders. Chiefs had powers, and they would allow and allocate fishers to land in certain places or beaches within their jurisdiction. And the control of the access and effort was not considered necessary. But of course, that time the fish stocks were in good health, landings were so high, and even the commercialization was not much of an issue. But we could look at traditional leaders having a major role in terms of demonstrating their powers. But also in return, they could get some gifts from those migrating fishers or even fishers from the same area. As I quote Chilwa, 1997, that's on page 65, states that according to Chief Kimwara, on the western part of Lake Morombe, in the southern part of Lake of Malawi, the power of the chief was over his people. He was their guardian, and they gave him or her gifts of food and other items in return for his guardianship. So we had to honor in that case, and then a portion of fish was always given to him as a token of appreciation. This has been also an issue to say, to what extent should we say it's a token of appreciation, or it's an issue that can even be associated with corrupt minds. Now, with time and commercialization, issues began to emerge. Like 1995, there was an influx of over 100 seine fishers from Lake Malawi because the lake dried up and they had to migrate to Lake Chiuta. Therefore, these conflicts emerged between fishers on the Malawian side and seine fishers who were allowed to operate from the Mozambican side. And in so doing, disagreements occurred. We have had support, of course, in one way or another. We had IUCN mostly, also the governments, both governments, but also USAID at one time around 2000 in this particular initiative. Now, let me go through, still on the roadmap, 1995 to 1996, what happened. Because of the conflicts that emerged and recorded and reported to both governments, we had meetings with local leaders and fishers on the Malawi side. And we had to seek support. These fishing communities had to seek support from the Department of Fisheries to recognize Lake Chiuta, ban the seine, the open water seine in Kacha. Fishers demanded the removal of traditional leaders' powers on controlling beaches of fish, because in some cases you could see some of the migrants being allowed to operate. So the fishers themselves said, I think at this particular time we should not allow local leaders to meddle in our issues. So they demanded rights on the management of the fishery. And they chased away all seine on Kacha fishers operating on the lake side, on the Malawi side, by banning their makeshift huts, gears, and even craft. And they started now formulating their own bylaws. And these are the bylaws. I will not go through that, but only that to say that there are some formal regulations like licensing, which is going on, but the ban of also ban use of Kacha and even mosquito nets not allowed. And also they said fish traps to have larger spaces, whereby you can use your finger, the thumb, to go through one of the opening, but it can be a bit controversial. It depends on how large the thumb is. But also in terms of size of the fish to be like Orichrome species, not less than 100 meters. But also there were also other informal rules. Going on, 1997 to 2000, we had to have the policy and legislative revision, like the Fisheries Conservation and Management Act of rules that is of 2000 bans open water seines, that in Kacha, in Lake Chiuta, but also licensing is allowed and also allows fish traps and gillnets only. So therefore, co-management was formally introduced with formation of 9 beach village committees, which are still there up now, but also some committees along the 4 rivers, and the formation of Lake Chiuta Association was formed. Then the constitution for the association was done, and there were some co-management review studies that were done by several scholars. Going on, from 2001 to 2009, we had support from IUCN after we approached them to say, I think there are conflicts on Lake Chiuta. So there was a meeting between Malawian and Mozambican fishers, as well as traditional leaders, to develop a management strategy and mitigation plan. And this was based on the ecosystems approach. And there was a study visit that was conducted to Lake Kariba, where we had also looking at the Transboundary Fisheries Management between Zambia and Zimbabwe. We had also annual review meetings that was on the Malawian side, but also we had reviews looking at field reports, newsletter, newspaper articles, workshop reports. But that's why we had this Thompson 2006 sighting Coca, indicating that Lake Chiuta was one of the 2 remaining large Malawian lakes in reasonable health. Going on, 2010 to 2022, where we are now, I think it's a long period. A lot has happened, a lot is happening. But on the photograph, if you can look at what is there, is indicating the official signing ceremony of the Malawi and Mozambique MOU on fisheries and aquaculture development. This is now looking at the part of formalizing the transboundary fisheries management. There were conflicts that emerged, and there were visits by government officials from Maputo to Lake Chiuta at the invitation of government of Malawi. So we had to agree to develop an MOU on fisheries management and aquaculture development, and official signing of the MOU was conducted here in Lilongwe on 23rd October 2014. And we had also an action plan that was developed and finalized in Maputo in 2017. And monthly joint meetings were conducted between Malawian and Mozambican fishing communities. And these are ongoing. As we are talking now, even this yesterday, I was in touch with my district fisheries officer in one of the districts. He said this is going on every 15th, every month. They meet, especially the fishers themselves. And at one of the meetings, they had to agree to respect the borders. But the question is, how do we look at the biological issue? Are we considering any issue about free riding? But we had also review studies with support from NEPAD and also annual review meetings. Like this month is when they can meet and agree to charge forward what they will do from 2023 onwards. Now, from all this, where are the key findings? Lake Chiuta has gone through all the 3 steps, I think based on the framework I indicated, but although it's not in a systematic way, this one was a crisis. It's the conflict that triggered this Transboundary Fisheries Management Initiative. Later, the process advanced to focus on the following, of course. I need to recognize powers for each partners, like beach village committees, association, traditional leaders, and governments. But also there's need to have a strategy and plan, goal and objectives. That's what we're going through. But also there was need that there was need for support that could come from local and central governments. But also looking at capacity building, you can look at the monitoring of the resource, but also the trips, the surveys that were carried out. On your right, that's some of the delegates that came from our neighboring country. And you can see that they were meeting Zomba District Council, one of the councils, which means when you come up with the Transboundary Fisheries Management, we should also look at decentralization as part of the process. So in summary, we're going to say Lake Chiuta Transboundary Fisheries Management has gone through this phase 1, that is 1999 to 2000. The source of conflicts, consultative meetings were conducted, joint meetings or bylaws were formulated, but also there was a formulation of a strategy and a plan. Although we are talking about 1999, because of the legislation, we can even go back to 1995 and not 1999. In phase 2, that's 2001 to 2009, we had the government meetings, but also setting up a joint team, drafting MOU, but also having council meetings. We are talking about council meetings because Somba, as one of the districts in Malawi, and as well as Machinga, had even to interface with one of the provinces, Mozambique and Ghana. In the first 3, then that's a formal agreement signed, finalizing the action plan, having joint monthly community meetings, as I indicated, 15th of every month. This is a summary of what has been the process like Lake Chiuta TFM phases. You're going to see, I think the left part is a photograph captured when the 2 teams met. That's at government level. And after that, they had also to visit some areas. That's now a community on the Malawian side, at Njera, on the Lake Chiuta Malawian side. Still, you can see the chair of the Lake Chiuta Association is making a report, is making a presentation about presenting everything that is going on the lake. Even the right one is the same, but also even the others. I think the right one is where there was a meeting now to draft the MOU and even have the action plan in place. There are several benefits, but that time, I think this was captured some time back. It was in 1999, taken by Donda. I'm hoping he's listening to this talk. You could see some new bicycles, but even new motorbikes. I'm not quite sure what is happening now. Maybe even that time, people could talk about maize mills and even wholesales and so on. Now, what are the opportunities that we have? The policy and legislative frameworks on decentralization and participatory fishery management in Malawi is in place. They are in place. We have an association and even BVCs, they are in place. There's commitment in political and technical support, but also indigenous knowledge is very rich about the ecosystem and biodiversity. They know when you would expect breeding to take place, by even species, even ecological status. They can tell you the community is aware of that. And I was just saying, I think this is quite related to the Rome Declaration, that's 2015, Rome Declaration on 10 steps to responsible inland fisheries by FAO. Although we haven't made use of this application declaration, but it's very important. In there, there's a recognition of indigenous knowledge. And also rural fish in healthy diets and household incomes is one of the aspects that we can look at. However, there are some threats or challenges. Different fishing regulations, sailing being allowed one side, another side is not being allowed. Do we expect free riders? Environmental degradation and climate change, like in 2015, 2016, we remember Lake Chiuta dried up. These are some of the threats that we expect. So there's need for initiatives that can look at early warning systems and capacity building in terms of adaptation. Inadequate support from central governments, yes, we have to talk about that. MOU expired in 2021, but we haven't yet made any initiatives, but of course we are discussing about that. No patrol boats for enforcement. Communities use their own boats to patrol the area, and even the governments don't even take part. Human resources for data collection and community outreach services, these are lacking, but most cases, the communities themselves are taking up all those initiatives. Governance issues, corruption, as well as enforcement, as we have talked about, but also to what extent is community participation, any elite capture. I think these are some of the gaps that we may need to look at. But if there's any need for any research, then we have to go for actual research. We have to do together with the communities. Otherwise, it will not be just a desk work or even some sort of academic work. Mosquito nets, they are posing a threat, and even the increase in seines. So all these illegal practices need to be looked into. I had data from 1998 up to 2012. These are the confiscated nets. And I had to ask my colleague in Machinga district, one of the districts, who today in the morning, the DFO, Mr. Samikwa, sent me data from 2013 to 2022. And this data is collected by the communities themselves. They have a record. You just have to call them and they'll give you. So you can see they have got the data from 1998 up to 2022. So it appears from 2019, there's a bit of progress, reduction in terms of confiscated nets from 2015. Last year we had 12. And this year, I think we may end up with having only 4, if all goes well. So these are more confiscated nets and mosquito nets. Communities do have the records. They have all the information that you would need. When you go there, they can give you. The highest was in 2013, 2014. Remember, we had to sign the agreement in 2014. We were trying to respond to what happened. You could see from 2012, 2013 to 2014. It's when now two governments had to sit down and look at the MOU to formalize the agreement. Key lessons. We do have shared small ecosystems like Lake Chiuta. Experience has it that there could be complex issues, but they are not attended by relevant authorities. TFM is effective where external influence is minimal. You could see that from the case of Lake Chiuta, TFM, government's role is quite minimal. Apart from coming up, recognizing the ecosystem, to be part and parcel within the legislative framework or policy framework. Not much. Enforcement is done by patrolling, is done by themselves. Number 3 is likewise community-led TFM initiatives may work better. Sorry for the spelling, better than those introduced by. We think we know everything. We can go to the community and say, can you go through this roadmap? But sometimes we don't get much as we would expect. So why can't we recognize these community-led initiatives? And the decentralization should also focus on shared ecosystems. Some, as I mentioned, Zomba and Matching have been also visiting, but although not on a regular basis, but exchange visits could be very important. Likewise, even the traditional leaders should be able to sit down on both sides and work towards TFL for the betterment of the TFL. Supported by other partners like government, NGOs, CSOs, private sector is also necessary, mainly for capacity building and also support when it comes to equipment that is necessary. For example, in the case of Lake Chiuta is an issue about robots. Final thoughts. Lake Chiuta Transboundary Fisheries remains in reasonable ecosystem health. Maybe we can say viable. Of course, within the V2V family, we have been discussing this even in Cape Town last week. I mean, 2-3 weeks ago. We have to define how do we look at when we say an ecosystem is viable, to what extent. But we are saying that maybe to a certain extent, looking at the phases that Van der Linde came up with in 2001, we are not doing badly in terms of the Lake Chiuta case. But also, of course, the biological and ecological assessment with the community involvement is quite necessary. More powers are with fishing communities than government, like what we have gone through, Malawian side and traditional leaders of the Mozambican side. But the question is, to what extent do we support? We know their gaps and so on. Sometimes you go in and with you think you know everything. Sometimes you also disturb. Probably we could support. We could look at the capacity building issue. However, governance issues still remain unattended to. We need to focus on decentralization, devolution, which functions should be devolved, and which powers should be ceded. But also MOU implementation should take another stage. It expired, we need to move in very quickly. Environmental degradation and climate change issues, especially on the Malawian side, at least it's better on the Mozambican side, but on the Malawian side, you find deforestation quite being a big issue. And in this particular case, then we should look at ecosystem approach to fisheries, which we should adopt. Another thought is that the TFM, I find that it should be adaptive, not so rigid. So we couldn't say this the size fit for all the cases, but we have to look at it and be adaptive as time goes on. So viability in terms of wealth generation and biodiversity can be assured. Of course, a further assessment is needed. But going further, we'll need also to look at the sustainability indicators. You got to see that using the desk work, those are in red. We need to validate that in the field. But in terms of attribute, we can look at changing attitudes towards fisheries management, both in the short and long term. We have to look at compliance, whether it's improving or not. We have to look at the conflict resolution, which whether these two continue or not. Not only between countries or fishing communities, but also within the committees themselves. This could be an issue. And are BVCs able to sustain themselves? That's quite important. To what extent should we provide external support? And also looking at the commitment of the government. But also we can look at improvement in the management process. Benefit cost analysis has to be done, coping mechanisms in terms of floods or drought, but also resilience. What sort of questions can we bring on board? But also social development and decent employment, gender issues, child labor, sanitation, feeder road, etc. I thank you all for your attention. I think this ends my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Friday. the case study of Lake Chiuta, is very inclusive in terms of your perspectives on different aspects of the development of the co-management plan and transboundary work. So there is a lot to learn, not only for the B2B work, but also transboundary work elsewhere. I was in Dhaka a couple of weeks back, and we talked about transboundary cooperation between India and Bangladesh within the Sundarbans ecosystem itself. So there is a lot to learn from there. So what I'm going to do is now bring some questions from the viewers on YouTube, and I'm going to read it out to you. If you can answer, and we can start some discussion on that. Okay. Friday, are you there?
Yes, I'm around.
Okay. So the first question is from Alina Faye Chivawana from Precom, Malawi. The question is, are there any challenges in the transboundary fisheries management? If yes, how are you resolving them? I think you showed a slide, but if you can elaborate on that, that would be great.
Should I go on?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I have already, I think in one of the slides, I highlighted some of the challenges that we have. For example, I was talking about the ongoing disagreements. What could be agreed in terms of the type of nets that should be used on the water, on the lake. You see that on the Malawi side, they're banning seines, while the same is used on the other side. So the question is biological, is this making any sense? That's why I was asking the question about free riding. Others trying to protect or conserve. The other side, maybe reaping or harvesting. So this could be one of the questions. But another question would be, even within the committees, beach village committees, and even association itself, at what extent do they also agree on certain terms? We have seen that in some cases, some BVCs appreciating the role of traditional leaders, others they don't. So, but are these based on concrete principles, or are they just for the sake of saying we don't want traditional leaders on personal reasons? So we find this as an issue. The second, the other one, I'm going to go on to look at the capacity in terms of not in terms of knowledge, yes, of course, but when you look at patrolling, there's a lack of patrol boats, which the committees could use. I find this quite, whenever we normally go there, they always say, can you support us on this? Can you support us on this? They're using their own craft vessels to patrol, but anything can happen. So they can even lose both the asset, which they post themselves. So I think this is the gap that we normally see. So there are so many, yes, there are challenges, there are issues that we need to attend to. In short, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Friday. The next question is from Innocent Gumulira, and the question is, are the RVCs still functional? And if you can elaborate on the role of RVC in
RVCs. Yes, RVCs, they are, but they normally become active whenever the water level goes a bit down. They're there, 4 of them. I can mention even the rivers. I might have forgotten. Lifun is one of the rivers. BVCs 9, they're still there. So they are under the umbrella of Lake Chiuta Association, which has been so instrumental and very active throughout all these years. The question would be why the chair has remained the same one since 1995. So that's why I think it also goes back to the area question. Some of the issues that we can find out. We find this, it's the same chair of the Lake Chiuta Association. They don't change. I find that a bit of problematic. He's doing well. He's doing all right. Why in their constitution they are saying every 3 years they have to change, but it has remained the same one. Maybe they are doing it's all right, but this could be an issue to look at the governance part. Should we go in if we go in, are we so clever to what extent can we advise them to say, now you have to change? Can't we disturb the host system? That's another fear that we may have. So yes, they're active. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. The third question is about the confiscation of the seines and the mosquito nets. And you showed a nice graph on that, I believe. There is an increase in the rate of confiscation in the phase 3 of the co-management, which is 2010 to 2022. Is there a correlation? What could be some of the driving factors for the increase in the confiscation in the rate of confiscation?
Right. Thanks. That's a good question. But let me, if
Friday, can I just request you to be on the video? I think you switched off your video, so if you can, yes.
Right. I changed my where I sat earlier on. Yeah. Actually, the co-management started in 1995 when the communities were not happy to have the influx of the migrating migrants from Lake Chilwa. When we sat down with the communities to understand their problems and also bring on board the piece of legislation to ban the seines and mosquito nets, there was an improvement. You will see that the numbers were not all that high until 2010, as you mentioned. So that's why in phase 2 we are saying there was the conflicts re-emerged. They came back. I think there was that time, Lake Chilwa is closer to Lake Chiuta, and whenever you have got the episodes, the dry, the recessions, they've been so frequent nowadays. Whenever you have got a problem Lake Chilwa, that pressure goes to Lake Chiuta. So from 2010, yes, that the emergence of the conflicts went up, and even we had a number of fishers operating seines. That's why the confiscation of the number of nets went up. And that's when we said, why can't we go in to formalize the agreement? Now the top governments had to come in to those two ministers to sign the agreement. After signing, you can see that there's a now lower. You could see that at least you could see that it's tapering off. Maybe like this year we're talking about 4, last year it was 13, the other year. So the question is, has the formalization worked the wonders? I think that could be the question. But this is what our colleague Van der Linde and the colleagues in 2001 indicated, that we just don't leave as it is without formalizing. So probably by formalizing, but we should also formalize and maybe and also try to make a follow-up, not just formalize and leave as it is, as we have done. We are more or less on the Malawi side. We haven't even met with our colleagues since we signed. It was only in 2017 when we looked at the action plan. Last year it expired. Now we are discussing how best can we do it. So you could see now there's a bit of change, as it were. But we can't celebrate as of now. We can wait for some more years. But we can see it's tapering off. 12 the other year. 13, 2021, and 4 only this year. Thank you.
Yeah, and you said that this is an adaptive process. So this goes with learning by doing, and you do adaptations, and there is success and failure, and it's an ongoing process, and it's not fixed. Yeah. Thank you. Next question is from Simon Nagwira, and they're asking what strategies are in place to address gaps in administration, research, or priorities between management agencies and governments, as the overlapping jurisdictions can result in fragmented management. The transboundary.
That's a good question. Actually, I could say that's why I had the biological studies or ecological studies. We have had enough of social dimension, the social part. We have studied co-management. We have looked at the DFM arrangement. So we do still have a gap. Can we correlate what we are saying, that what we are talking now, in terms of we look at the resource itself? But the question also biological, there's a biological question to say, if one side is operating differently in terms of type of nets that could be used, what that interpret like what can that lead to. So there are those gaps, yes, indeed, and they probably will need more biologists to go to the lake. But as I mentioned, we have to look at the involvement of the communities.
Mm-hmm.
They will not allow you to go there without their blessing. That's what it is all about. They're so particular, they're so demanding when you talk about it in research. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Akash Kar is asking if environmental degradation or climate change issues continue, what could EAF implementation look like? Thank you for the presentation.
Well, our colleagues are better on the Mozambican side. If you stand on the shoreline on the Malawi side, you look at the Mozambican side, you find trees that are there. Of course, there's a bit of a change. While on the Malawi side, there's a bit more of deforestation. So we could go to look at afforestation programs. Let's plant more trees along the rivers because they are there right now. But also let's bring in technologies when it comes to fish processing. You know, the much wood that is used to process fish. But even when we want to construct vessels, why can't we look at the other options of materials rather than wood? Is there an option to use fiberglass? Is it an option to look at steel and so on, other materials rather than wood? So because when we use the planks every time and then we are using forests that resources on the marine side. But on the other side, it's quite in good health. It's quite in good health. Maybe it's due to population increase, but we have to look at all this in totality. This is one area that we can move on, not looking at the aquatic system only, but also even what is happening upland. I think that's what we can focus on. And we need the other experts to focus on that as a gap, research gap as well. Thank you.
Okay. Enot Chindebu is asking, what is the role of the district councils in relation to monitoring and surveillance activities on the lake?
Not much as of now, unfortunately, not much. Of course, they just provide guidance. Maybe conflicts erupt, they go on the other side to discuss with their counterparts in Mikanyela's province and the district. But that's what I said. In terms of digitalization, that's a gap. We need to move on, not focus much on only the larger ecosystems, but even the smaller ecosystem like Lake Chiuta. There's a lot. Sometimes we may not value what it is, but we say the catches are so small. We are looking at 1,500 tons. We better go for Lake Chiuta, which can give us, Lake Chilwa, which can give us 25,000 tons, or Lake Malawi, which can give us 140,000 metric tons. We leave out these small ecosystems, but there's a lot that is being appreciated by local communities. That's why I made a recommendation to say I think we need to tie in to streamline when they look at the whole decentralization process, but look at the roles of the council themselves. Not wait until we have conflicts, but even right now, it's a good time, an opportune time that we can move in to even appreciate what is going on. So I take that as a gap as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Friday. Still a lot of questions flowing in, and we have a bit of time to discuss those. Ruel Mia is asking, are there any initiatives from the government and non-government organizations to resolve power imbalances and allow fishers to participate actively in the decision-making and the co-management process?
Yes, a very good question. We do realize those are part of the governance issues. I even give you an example to say the chair has been there for a long time, since 1995. It's also a gap. That's an issue. So we are looking at the power dynamics. In one of my papers, I've looked at that. How do we share the powers? Looking at those, not only between the government and even or BVCs or even association, but even within themselves. Powers between BVCs as traditional leaders. I'm not quite sure whether I'm answering the question clearly, but when it comes to social studies, Donda has done a lot of it, and Mafahara has also done a lot of it. We have got also support from Fish Project, supported by USAID. There's been a bit of a change for the betterment. They could understand now. Unlike in the past, it was like they were working like vigilantes in courts. You couldn't see how organized they were. But now you can go and discuss with them, and they appreciate also when you come down to the table. But they always say, we are doing a lot. Government is not supporting us. We do expect that. We do also appreciate that. We are not doing much. We do accept. But we take their sentiments and as we move on. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's not an easy task,
Exactly.
Yes, yeah. And okay, the last question that I see here on the YouTube, is Roderick Kundu. And Roderick is asking, the conflict over the resource use seems to be due to fishing malpractices and migration politics. Are there other underlying factors that could be undermining the bottom line of sustainable management?
Very big question, complicated. But I really appreciate that question. Yes, apart from migration, apart from the conflicts we are talking about, what other factors could come in? I find climate change also another issue. Because you do see that although we talk about, when you look at the water level, every year the water level goes down when it comes to dry season. And that brings the water, it's like a basin, like a pond. So that's why you have more fishers now into that. And that's why we have the seine fishers, because they cannot operate where you have got the vegetative cover. It's quite difficult. Otherwise, they will remove. We find that also as a problem, because when the water level has gone down, when you have a seine operation, they have to remove the vegetation. They'll clear the weed, which is quite important for to hide where fish can seek refuge. So there are certain areas apart from these migrants, but we find maybe it could also go down to say, what can we do with Lake Chilwa, which dries up, because this is when we normally have the pressure. But we can't. These are natural phenomena. But can we look at the adaptation strategies, probably, to address some of the areas? But that's a good question, quite difficult to answer, but more broader. Maybe it's giving us a research area that we can look at. Some of these questions we need to do more in terms of our research.
Yeah, and that question really relates well to the previous one on power, disbalances. Okay, so I have one last question from Derek Armitage from University of Waterloo, and I'll read it out, and then after your response, we'll bring the webinar to an end. Derek is saying, thanks, Dr. Najaya. A really interesting cause with a lot of lessons and insights to reflect upon. In particular, the case is a great example of the dynamism between vulnerability and viability. There are examples from the case that show progress towards greater viability, like greater wealth creation for fishers, as you saw on one of your slides. But at the same time, new drivers of vulnerability that can undermine viability, because it's an ongoing process. In particular, you mentioned at one point monitoring. I'm curious to know if monitoring and community-led monitoring especially may be a way to support learning and encourage a greater focus on the features of the system that support viability, that is building capacity.
Good question, Derek. Yes, that's quite a good observation. We are moving towards viability. At the same time, we are creating more problems. Maybe in the future, we'll even be coming back to say, are we resetting the pattern? We could look at even some of the key drivers. Increase in the population, one of them. Climate change issues could be an issue. As we move on to commercialize the sector, even for the communities to understand the importance, the monetary part of it, because in the past, it was mainly for subsistence and so on. You find that every fish now is money. We will be having these problems now and then. Then the other vulnerability of Lake Chilwa, which is part of the V2V project, definitely we have to look at how can we combine the two, so that when we're addressing issues of Lake Chilwa, we're also looking at the issues of for Lake Chiuta. They're just so close, about less than 40 kilometers apart. So these are some of the issues, but I take it as one of the areas that we can focus on with our colleagues on the Mozambican side. We are meeting them in March or April. So this could be some of the issues that we will be focusing on. I think I do appreciate that observation. Thank you, Patrick.
Yeah. Friday, we have a related question from Patrick McConey. Welcome, Patrick, and good to see you here. Patrick is asking, what is the realistic likelihood of multi-stakeholder participatory monitoring, evaluation, and learning, MEL, to support actively adaptive governance and management?
That's a good one. Patrick, we can team up and see how best we can, what would be the approach, multi-stakeholder. How can we bring that into the perspective as we are discussing now? We would appreciate, because as I mentioned, there are so many gaps that we have to look at. And the experts across the world, whoever they are ready to come and partner with us. But to what extent are we talking about the multi-stakeholder? Of course, right now it's only maybe traditional leaders and as well as association, as well as government. Unfortunately, not many NGOs are supporting. So that's a good question. That's why I find it a very interesting aspect. Apart from IUCN, we had a bit of support from a project Fish. You said they were there for studies. So we would rather get more from your expertise and let's work together on this particular fishery. Very small, but very valuable by the local communities. Thank you.
Yeah. Since we have a few minutes left, if I may just ask you one question. You started your talk with a quote from one of the local leaders, who says the government has failed, and that becomes a motivation for you as the director of fisheries to engage in this kind of which is marvelous. So how you take inspiration from local perceptions and experiences to engage in this kind of complex work. So if you could elaborate a little bit more and share your experience on what does that motivation mean, and it's a nice example of co-management and government and local communities working together. So we want to learn from your experience on that. So talk about a little bit more about that motivation, please.
Thanks, Pradeep, for that. Yes, when I was coming up with the presentation, I had to remove my coat as director of fisheries. I had to come in as a researcher. Otherwise, I would have not highlighted that one to say government has failed. But it just shows that maybe in our programming, as I mentioned, we don't realize the importance of these small ecosystems. Normally, we are going for these large ones. Even the district fishery officer has been asking for more support on this particular aspect. It's now time when we reflect on to say maybe we have to come in as partner. I like also the other question on the multi-stakeholder partnership and learning process. Maybe this is the time that we can jack up in terms of what sort of support we can give. Actually, when they invite us to go there, but they will always say, "What are you doing?" Of course, we have got extension officer there, but they will say, "You're not supporting it." So I had to be more bold on that to say this is the kind of scenario we have. But also, I wanted to highlight the power dimension, the power dynamics. To say the communities in this particular case have got more powers than the government side. That was what I wanted to highlight. They are doing the community outreach services on their own. You can see the data that we are getting. It's not from our office. It's from themselves. You just go there, you interact with them. They are able to say, can you go on the lake? Now we don't have aquatic vegetation. To them, they value that vegetation rather than people come and remove because of thinning and so on. So there's vast experience, vast knowledge, indigenous knowledge that they have. So I was trying to look at the power dynamics part of it in short. That's why I say I think there's more that communities is doing rather than the government side. If we can look at the self-initiatives that communities come up with, we just come in to support them rather than we go in as experts. We call ourselves as experts. Then with our frameworks, with our roadmaps, you have to do A, B, C, D, as if everything is okay. It's not so easy. Even if you go into an area and you say maybe you want to study the communities and so on, it will take you 20 years or so on. Rather than the knowledge is there. So it was a matter of power dynamics. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That is such an enriching process over the last 1 hour to listen to the case study on Lake Chiuta, and also the discussions on many fronts, and much more to discuss as we continue. But at this time, and I would like to thank you, Friday, for making the time and telling the Chiuta story, and also the audience that have joined and asked really meaningful questions and engaged in the discussions on transboundary small-scale fisheries. Before we close, we will be starting a new series in 2023, which is the B2B Global Partnership Thematic Webinar Series 2023. And we will announce that in the first week of January with a list of speakers that we are confirming at this point in time. So please join us, in January and rest of the 2023 on the same platform on YouTube. And we will be circulating necessary information through our website, Twitter, and other avenues that we always use. So thank you once again very much, to Dr. Najaya and the audience, and I look forward to continuing this discussion into the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.